if you feel torn about the ICE raids, this is going to probably change your mind because last time I watched a video by this guy, he made some solid points. So let's see what he's got for
You
us this
know,
time.
it's kind of weird where life takes you. 6 years ago, I was chanting abolish ICE on the steps of the Supreme Court during their DACA decision. And as my viewpoints and worldview shifted in the last few years,
Nice flag.
I
Like
still,
it.
for the
America.
longest time, had a residual hesitation to acknowledge that I might have been wrong about ICE. But
Nobody wants to admit they're wrong
time
about
won out my
things.
resistance, and my views have shifted from seeing them as an evil to a necessary evil to simply necessary.
I can
And
believe that.
since this is something I've gone through myself, I suspect many of you have conflicting thoughts about immigration enforcement. Of course, many of you don't. There's people on either ends of the spectrum, right? People who want every illegal immigrant deported to people, crazy people, who want no enforcement at all. But I'm reaching out to a lot of you stuck somewhere in between. Those who maybe say only deport those who commit violent crimes,
That's kind of where I'm
or
at.
don't deport the ones who've been here for decades, or brought
Maybe.
here as
I don't know
children,
about it.
which, as to that last point, still makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm
I
here
guess,
to
yeah.
tell you the reasons why I felt
They didn't
conflicted
choose
for
to
the
be here.
longest time, how I've come to think about it now, and finish off with two important things for you to bear in mind as you work through this issue for yourself. To start, as my worldview shifted, what really sold to me the necessity for enforcement wasn't that fact that in these last few years, a lot of
Mhm.
violent criminals were coming in to our communities. Of
True.
course, that matters a lot. And despite the insistence of these immigrant advocacy groups, it's not scaremongering. People who are killed, these are real people, and its consequences are borne not by these advocates, but
Hmm.
by the families to whom this has happened. But it's not that. What really sold it for me was I started caring more about the principle of the matter.
Okay, pop
Generally
off. What do
speaking,
you
I
mean?
notice it's something that happens a lot with people as they turn 30. A lot of us lose some of our youthful, permissive, indulgent, laissez faire attitude towards the misconduct of others, and in its stead, we grow increasing intolerance of people who do not
Oh
conform their
boy.
conduct to law or social custom. And
I'm not sure about the whole law thing, but I can tell you that I've pretty much never like anybody who was doing crazy things or acting stupid. Even though that was me sometimes, I didn't like it when I did it either. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, I'm not sure about like whole like follow all the laws and be a square and shit like that. Like I think that you should definitely follow any of the laws that negatively impact other people around you. But if you want to jaywalk, if there's no cars around, then like, dude, yeah, whatever. I don't care. If you want to play your music too loud and you're not disturbing too much, then I don't care about that, anyways. You like my new hair? Thank you. I appreciate it. I got the mustache to go with it. There, maybe not. Yeah, but that's my idea.
and in this specific case, here is the principle of the matter:
Excuse me.
the law. Sometimes we like to say the law is wrong, and if the law is wrong, you are under no moral obligation to follow it. And in some instances of our
Mm,
history, I would tend
sure.
to agree. But the law isn't wrong just because you feel deep down that it is. Here's a quote: "The law is not known to him who knoweth not the reason therefore." Why do we include some people but exclude others? Because that is the very essence of nationhood. What is property but a right to possess and enjoy to the exclusion of others? And what is a nation but that which belongs to
Mm,
its people? A right to exclude and regulate aliens is an inherent right reserved for peoples of any nation. Have you thought about the fact that after decades of the same conversation, you have not convinced a majority of the people to change the law in your favor?
well, that's because laws are made by the people who are voted into office, and the people who are voted into office are voted in mostly by people who voted for them, which is the majority of the community. So we follow laws that are misdemeanors and these, less morally bound laws because our community voted them in. The majority of the people wanted those representatives in, and those representatives created these laws. So as a byproduct, it's the majority of the population's responsibility. Now there are some laws that are just flat across the board, would probably exist, like no murder, no nothing to do with any of the X crimes. None of them to do with any violent behavior or robbery or burglary, anything like that. Yeah, those are probably gonna be illegal in pretty much any country and in any capacity. and but the degrees of varying disciplinary procedures after that are going to be different for each company or for each country. And so, yeah, that's
So
how it works,
maybe the
basically,
law
in my
isn't
opinion.
wrong. Maybe there's something to this law you're not seeing. Maybe you're in the wrong. And at least in this instance, your blanket approval or endorsement of lawbreaking under the premise that the law is wrong reflects a selfishness on your part. Because if everyone had your attitude for whatever cause they held dear, we wouldn't have a society, or at least one anyone would want to live in. But as I've said, I still felt conflicted, even after my viewpoints have shifted. Because there's a principle of a matter on its face, and that principle as applied to your life. Where on its face you would not question its sacredness, you start seeing more of the downsides and the human aspect as applied.
Mm.
And here's the thing, for millions of Americans, we know illegal immigrants in our
Mm-hmm.
lives,
Yeah, for sure.
not
I
just
live in
as
Texas. There's
acquaintances,
tons of them
but
everywhere.
neighbors, friends, confidants,
I don't
and
really have
family
a
members.
problem with it.
If you have illegal immigrants in your life, it's very hard to see them as an abstract problem that needs to be dealt with. You
Mm.
form a bond with people,
Yeah.
and you witness firsthand and sympathize with their plight. Maybe these people are
Yeah, it's hard if you know one of your friends like that you're really close with is an illegal immigrant and they are at risk of being deported. If you have coworkers, maybe you work at a restaurant and you have coworker friends that are at risk of being deported. Maybe that you work with or you have people who your kids hang out with whose parents are illegal immigrants and they might get deported, and then your kids' friends are now going to have to deal with that. And you might know them very well because they hang out with your kids, and you might think as your own kids, and that's something that really happens. Religion majority is what influences laws. Yeah, I would say that that's kind of true. A nation's majority of religion is going to be the religion that votes people most into office because they have more votes and more say in the matter. So it's just like if a country is heavily Muslim, they're going to have more Muslim centric laws. If they're Christian, they're going to have more Christian centric laws. If they're Jewish, like in Israel, they're going to have more Jewish centric laws. I mean, that's just because the majority of the population have the similar opinions and they're the ones voting people in. So they're going to vote for people who have kind of like alignment to their religious and moral views. So yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely.
living life with constant weight on their shoulders. They're unable to seek justice or recourse when someone has wronged them because they're afraid of knocking on the door of the system. And when you see people who you know to be a good person suffer like that, can't help but feel something.
Pretty good point. Like it.
That is what I think leads a lot of us to think, man, the law is in the wrong. And even if you know in principle that, as with everything in life, you make the bed you lie in, that illegal immigrants, at least as to the adults who made the conscious choice to break the law, you assume the risk that the shadow would cast
Back to
in
your phone.
perpetuity
Thanks for the
on the
follow,
stability
my
of your life
man.
so long as you stay,
Or woman.
even if
Whoever
you
you are,
know
whatever
that
you are.
on principle, I nevertheless can't help but think
Yeah, you guys, if you guys aren't following me on the stream, please feel free to follow me. I'm trying to get to 500. It'd be a nice round number. I think that's odd if you would do that for me. So if you're not right now and you're joining the stream and you can see it, give me a little follow. You don't have to get any alerts. Just follow me. It'd be nice.
that I very well could have made the same choices were I to be in their circumstances.
True.
And when I say that, I mean they
Mm.
weren't left with a choice between immigrating legally versus illegally. Their choices were to immigrate illegally or not at all. Often, when someone who has been here for a long time is arrested by ICE,
Okay.
we hear, well, you've been here 20 years, why couldn't you have applied for a green card? Well,
Isn't it
having
expensive?
a degree of familiarity with immigration law, I can tell you there are certain avenues through which one can attain a green card.
Okay.
And if those avenues are foreclosed to you,
Why
for
would they be?
instance, because you don't have an immediate family member who can sponsor your petition,
Okay.
or you wouldn't be eligible for an H-1B, there's no
Okay.
legal means through which you can
What is an
immigrate.
H1B? I
And
want to look that up real quick. Let's see. What is an H1B? Non-immigrant work visa. Incendiary inhalation. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate you. Yes, awesome. I guess it works to ask people to help out by following you. Nice. Non-immigrant work visa that allows U.S. employers to hire foreign workers in special occupations. Oh, okay. So like H1B visa. Oh yeah, because I have an Indian friend who's on H1B visa, because his company said, "Hey, we need you. We want you." And then is sponsoring him to work here. Specialty occupation, initial duration, annual cap of 85,000 visas issued per year. Oh, so there's a cap to it. Advanced degrees. Okay. And then a lottery system. That just seems okay. Need the cap, but there's a lottery system. Okay. Path to green card. Some age when transition to permanent residency. Green cards. Okay. I mean, that's pretty neat. I had no idea about any of that. So
And
now I know.
I was
Cool.
never in this circumstance, but if you feel like you have nothing else to lose because the country in which you were born is either dangerous or present no opportunities for upward mobility, I could see why they would make that choice to break the law
Wouldn't you do that for you and your
because
family? Would you leave this
here's a way
country
better
if
place
it
to
if it
live.
went to shit and then
So
left
yeah,
to another country and
simply
then stayed in that
saying,
country?
they should have done it legally
Maybe.
is kind of a half truth. But there's also a lot of other half truths that are replete in this dialogue about immigration. Half truths that confuse and mislead the jury, that is the American public. And sure, some of it weighs in favor of the illegal immigrant, like what I just mentioned. But there's also a lot of half truths going the other way, and those merit discussion as well. Here's one. They say illegal immigrants pay taxes. And here's the thing,
They do.
if you are a
Yeah.
undocumented immigrant, that is to say, you do not have legal.
Cheap ass drinks. These, yeah. I buy them from Aldi's because I don't like spending money. I know you can probably see it. But they're 0 calories. They taste like TV static with a little bit of lemon in them, especially this flavor. But they're good.
Status, but you are in some way accounted for by the government, sure, you pay taxes. So that be, for instance, DACA recipients,
Mm,
out of status TPS beneficiaries, or or you faced a removal proceeding and your removal was withheld by the judge, also
mm.
known as withholding of removal, or you circumvent U.S. labor laws barring unauthorized work by creating an LLC, working on
What's the funniest hate comment I've ever received? Somebody was talking shit about my hairline earlier. I thought that was pretty funny.
under the designation of an independent contractor by getting an ITIN number issued. In all these instances, the illegal immigrant pays taxes. But these
Hmm.
limited category of people do so because, like the rest of us, they have to. They're
Yeah.
accounted for by the government. They're in the system. The government will come after them if they do not.
Hmm.
But this represents but a small fraction of the illegal immigrant population.
Well, also, if you buy anything from the store, you're paying a sales tax usually. Or if you're buying a car from a dealership, you're paying a sales tax. So, like, that's also a part of it. Like, sales tax isn't probably a huge part of it, but still, 8% on every purchase ever made with our GDP? That's a lot of money coming back.
Okay? The overwhelming vast majority, the rest, do not pay taxes. None I've ever
Yeah,
known
no,
throughout the
they
course of
do.
my
They
life
do
did.
pay taxes.
Vast majority don't have a social
Just
nor an
not in a
IT
conventional
number.
way that we think of
Many
it.
don't have a bank account. They earn cash and spend cash, and none of it goes to our collective pot. I can
That's not
understand
true,
from their
but, like,
perspective
yeah.
why they would
You get it because of the sales tax specifically. There's a list of all the different taxes that they can qualify for. So let's see. What are all the tax categories? Income taxes is a huge one, right? And I think that's what Trump was trying to do, is trying to hinder Vortex Destroyer. Thank you for the follow, man. Is trying to get rid of those and replace them with tariffs, but I don't think that we could tariff enough to replace them. Payroll taxes, that's employment, so they probably wouldn't qualify for that. Corporate and business taxes, they wouldn't qualify for that. Capitals gains and investments taxes, they probably couldn't because they don't have the ability to trade. Property taxes is possible. I know that they probably indirectly pay property taxes because they might rent houses from somebody who pays property taxes. So indirectly, they're paying for that. So number five, they could do that. Sales and use tax, absolutely they pay sales tax. Excise tax, sin taxes, absolutely they pay those taxes. Estate, gift, and inheritance taxes, they don't pay that. Import and tariffs, they won't pay that, except for by the transfer of that cost into the stuff that they're buying from that. And then miscellaneous taxes, they do pay probably lodging taxes, internet and communication taxes, and vehicle registration. So they do pay quite a bit of taxes. Can't say that they're not paying taxes.
hesitate to reveal themselves to the system. But it's also not right, as a matter of generalization, to say that illegal immigrants pay taxes, okay? Because you're arguing the rule from the extremes. And that matters because it then colors the
Yeah, they all pay
derivative
taxes. Yeah.
inference that they are somehow more deserving of a grant of legal status. No. Here's another thing that advocates say that's a half truth. They say immigrants commit, on a per capita basis, less crimes than their natural born citizen counterparts.
That's probably true. They don't
But
want to
this
get in
is a
trouble
half
and get
truth,
sent away.
not because it generalizes from the extremes, as in the last example, but rather because it sees not the forest for the trees. Okay? The basic issue here is people have a problem with people coming into the country, then committing crimes, especially violent crimes.
Mm,
It signals that you don't have basic respect. So you can say immigrants commit less crimes than their natural born citizens do, but I'll tell you why that's a bunch of nothing burger. Suppose that you are the head of a household and some of your children keep dragging the mud in. It's a perpetual nuisance.
true.
And then suppose some uninvited guests enter your house and they also drag the mud onto your carpet. And you're like, what are you doing? And how would you react if those people were like, well, your own children drag in more mud? Would you be like, oh, psst,
I don't know
didn't think
about
of
the
that.
example, but it's kind of funny to
Please
think about.
come in for dinner. We're having hot pot. No. You'd be like, excuse me? Yeah, my children do that.
Okay.
I have to
Yeah,
deal with it because they're my children.
exactly.
You are not.
I guess I get that.
You're
Yeah,
new.
that makes
I don't have to deal with you. Get out.
get out. Yeah.
That's how people feel when you say something like that. And finally, just one more thing on this topic of half truths. People say America is an immigrant nation. True. I think America is a melting pot, and that
Yeah.
is one of the things that makes it unique.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say that mantra to justify unchecked and illegal mass migration, that mantra then becomes one born from mindlessness. Because to say America is an immigrant nation to justify mass illegal migration is to commit arson at a barbecue joint, then declare, what is barbecue without fire? A fire is only as useful and beneficial insofar as it bends to the needs and the will of its handler, and immigration, the needs and will of its nation. But, as I've told you, I felt conflict about this issue for a long time, because, like millions of Americans, I've known many illegal immigrants throughout the course of my life, and none of them are like the ones on TV. At least the ones I've known, they're good and honest people. Really, I have nothing
That's
bad
my
to
experience
say
with
about
them.
them.
I really haven't met somebody who's an illegal immigrant that I haven't liked or that hasn't been a pleasant person to experience like or talk to. And even if there's a language barrier there, I don't really care. Like if I were to go to a different country, there's going to be a language barrier for me, and I would hope that people would extend me the same courtesy. That individual didn't do anything necessarily directly wrong with me, and it's not my responsibility to check the citizenship of people or to assume that people aren't going to be here or aren't allowed here. I mean, so what if you can't speak English? I'm not going to like wonder whether or not you have papers. It's not my authority. I don't have the authority to do that, nor do I have the care in the world. That's somebody else's job. It's somebody else's deal. It's somebody else's problem. That's why I pay taxes. If you guys are enjoying the stream and you guys want to support me, go ahead and just give me a follow because I really would like to make it to 500 followers. I think I'm pretty close. I don't know exactly what number I'm at because I don't really keep too much track. I just check it occasionally. But if you guys are enjoying the stream, go ahead and give me a nice little follow just because, you know, you guys love me and I love you. So give me some love. Show me. Or don't. It's fine.
And so it would be easy for me to just take the position that the government should catch all the violent criminals and leave the rest alone. But no, as difficult as it was for me to reach this conclusion, I stand firm in saying we need to enforce our immigration laws as written, even despite the considerations in my life, in my personal life, or yours, because it's bigger than me or you. I mean, some of you may still feel torn if you acknowledge as an abstract matter its necessity, but when
Hmm.
it actually plays out in real life, the impact tugs on your sense of sympathy. So
Yeah.
it's your freedom to think however you like,
Pop, thanks for the
but let me give you
follow.
2 points
Appreciate
that
you.
weigh heavily in my consideration for yours. Number one, the United States of America has the most generous immigration policy, bar none, of all countries in the
Does
world,
it?
and it has the
Y'all
most
agree with that?
stringent due process standards under which an unauthorized immigrant is expelled from the country. I bring this up because we
I
will
think it
hear
is
news
true.
of ICE raids, and some of these stories may unsettle you. You might have heard somewhere that ICE entered without a warrant, or detained a veteran for questioning, or misrepresented themselves in order to get someone to open the door. Here's a big takeaway I learned from law school, or more broadly, from life. There's how a story sounds on its face when one interested party recounts the events.
Much easier than other countries. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is a lot easier. I think there were some situations where, if I remember correctly, people would get over the wall and then let themselves get caught because they knew that they were going to get freed out of a jail and not sent back to the different country. Beat it. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that,
And there's
man.
how a story actually is when the adverse party gets to air out their side of the story. Something I'm reminded of time and time again. And so when you hear these stories by advocates appearing in front of news cameras, be aware that you never get to hear particulars of a story from the agency because the
Hmm.
agency is not in the business of defending in the court of public opinion every step they take.
True. Yeah,
So
he's right.
if one contends, as a mayor of a sanctuary city recently did, that ICE acted outside the
I'm
confines of
sub
the
to this
law,
guy. You guys should sub to
which,
this guy.
if true, would be unacceptable,
His name's Charlie
that
Cheon.
contention does not, by itself, make it so. You never hear whether, for instance, the owner of the business raided by ICE consented to the search, which is one of the well established exceptions to the warrant requirement. You
Mm.
never hear, for another,
Yeah, I don't get that. No, I don't think that somebody is going to be willing to get rid of half of their workforce by calling in an ICE raid unless there's some incentive to it. So if there's some kind of payment plan or something like that that gets you money if you rat on people and you're trying to make a little extra cash and you know you could just replace them. You can have a revolving door. You could open a business where you hire only illegal immigrants and then you wait a couple of weeks and let them work and then every month before the bills come due or before you have to pay them, you just tell them, "Hey, ICE is gonna come," or don't tell them. Tell ICE to come get them. They pick them up. You don't have to pay them their money or whatever, and then you can just like rinse and repeat that. And then all that money that you were gonna spend, you don't have to spend. And then all that money that you get, you can spend on helping train new people and just have that money. This is what I like to call an unethical life hack. Do not do this. This is the worst thing you can do for morally as a human being, I feel like. But I mean, there you go.
whether there was
The thing
probable
you
cause
probably
to
could do
detain an
if they have
individual who
incentives.
later turned out to be a US citizen, or the surrounding details, like how long were they detained for, minutes at the scene, or days in custody, what questions were they asked, and what the officers knew in questioning a suspect.
Mm.
Those questions are all relevant in determining whether there was a violation of a constitutional right. But you never hear these details. You just hear a one sided story. You never hear all the facts because unfavorable facts are withheld by those whose intent is to disparage. No, fair is fair. And here's some facts. The immigrant facing a removal proceeding is accorded due process. In many instances, he is not even detained. He's instead issued a ticket and given a date for him to appear
He won't
at a
show
later
up.
date in the immigration court. A
Would
good
you show
number
up?
are no shows, and that is when they are pursued.
Yeah.
And if an
I don't think I would
adverse
show up.
decision is made, he can appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals.
I don't
If
know.
they don't
Maybe I would
afford him
show up.
relief, he can then appeal to an Article 3 court. Throughout that process, the prosecuting attorney, the judge, the review board retain discretion. Why discretion? To withhold his removal if they think that the circumstances of his life is such that it would not be fair to deport him, even if his illegal status is without question. As for the agency,
That's an interesting
ICE ranks
fact
its
if that's true.
priorities and pursues enforcement such that those who have been here for a long time without having committed any crimes are at the bottom of their priorities.
As they should be.
What I'm trying
Why
to
would they be
say
prioritized
is
higher?
many who are against
They shouldn't.
deportations per se will try to paint the image that the process is unfair, inhumane, and heavy handed. But at least on this earth, it is the most orderly, humane process with safeguards, checks, and balances. Doesn't mean it's
Or it
perfect.
is now.
And there's some things I
Yeah,
would
there's a
like
lot
to
of
see,
speculation of whether or
like
not
the
they're going
right
to
to
have like
counsel for
concentration
the
style
indigent,
camps.
commensurate with what the Constitution requires for a criminal defendant. But here's the point of what I'm trying to say. You say it's unjust, but justice doesn't always look like what you think it should. Because for every party who
True.
claims justice has been served, there sits on the other side an adversary that says injustice has occurred.
Yeah.
That is why the universal symbol of law is a scale.
Balance, baby.
Justice is found on a balance, weighing competing interests, and the country has a compelling interest in enforcing its immigration laws. And you are misguided if you think it is just to tilt the scale whenever a party on one side claims a right to relief by the virtue of their sympathetic circumstances. Number
Yeah.
two, and this is the bigger picture, the bigger picture that makes me stand tall in the face of my personal reservations and doubts. Why does the country have a compelling interest in enforcing its immigration laws? Because that is about the survival and continuation of a nation.
Okay, I'm gonna be interested in hearing what he has to
Under
say
the
about
last
that.
administration, we saw what it looks like when you take a permissive approach towards this issue. 2 million people have entered successfully without inspection within the span of a few years, including some who have been deported not once, not twice, but 10 times.
A lot of times to get deported.
So I said to you earlier, a fire is only as useful and beneficial insofar as it bends to the needs and the will of its handler, and immigration the needs and will of its nation.
Hmm.
Here's the thing we should talk about. Yes, Americans of the 21st century include people from all over the world. And that is one of the things that makes America special in my eyes. But for any progeny of those who immigrate, again, from all corners of the world, you take on a distinct American identity, blended yet separate from the identity you hold from your ancestral roots.
Yeah, you're American now.
You are Korean American. You're Mexican American. You are Ethiopian American. You're Polish
Fusion
American.
American.
But at the end of the day, you are still American. And as with any identity, there's a character and spirit attached to that American identity, born from American culture, history, and tradition. Certain belief systems and institutions whose continued existence depends on the command of this land by people with this
Oh,
identity.
hello, Daniel.
I'm talking about things like
Look at
rule
this
of
little
law,
immigrating
process,
into my lap.
separation of powers, federalism, guarantees of individual liberties, constitutional protections of the accused, separation of church and state, right to bear arms. But I'm also talking
much
about
separation of
the
church and state?
intangible culture sprung therefrom, like
You said it
suspicion
was a
towards a
religious
centralized authority,
persecution.
or its attempts to disarm the populace, or an unapologetic expression of individualism as against a hostile collective.
Yeah.
And herein lies the difference between legal and illegal immigration. The difference between controlled pouring of water into a glass jar and dumping it until the jar tips over. The lawful immigration process is one by which the American people safeguard these belief systems and higher ideals.
Mm-hmm.
With the orderliness
Okay, I get that.
and constraints of the lawful process, immigrants and their succeeding generations learn, at least to varying degrees, to assimilate into a dominant American culture, embrace these ideals, and thereby become American. And they are, at least to me, as American as those whose ancestors came on the Mayflower. But unchecked and unauthorized mass immigration is dangerous for that very reason. It tends to dilute the social political power of those among us who are attached to this culture and identity. It tends to
Sequel.
deepen the crater
Sequel?
of disloyalty of the
Thank you
people
for the follow, sequel.
to their country.
Thank you.
History is
the
replete
movement.
with such stories. If we had it the way some people
Head
want it to be,
cook.
no deportation,
Thank you.
no enforcement, which means
Are you
an
cook?
open border,
Beth?
you
Thanks
are
for the follow.
spelling for the succeeding generations the end to this country. Because if people who have no attachment nor loyalty to this land begin to settle at overwhelming rates, the public conversations we have about what this country is supposed to be about will look very different. You know, some people will say, oh, that's hysteria. You know, it's the great replacement theory. Look, by saying that, you're dismissing a legitimate concern. You know, I'm here to tell you, I don't care much about the racial composition of the country. Some of you might. I don't. In fact, I like it very much that it's a melting pot. That's not the issue. The issue is whether the people coming in will have loyalty to the country and attachment to its way of life. And the more people pour in by the millions
Yeah, I can
without
agree with
any
this.
checks, the less you'll see of that. If that happens, the future populace will not seek to retain and defend a distinct American identity and spirit, or preserve for their progeny this country's unique traditions, because an inadequate proportion of the population will insist on it. So that's why I landed at this conclusion despite feeling conflicted. There's first the principle that a society not ruled by authoritarianism or mob justice requires law and order. The rule of law matters. And there's
Does.
also the important fact that Americans will inevitably see control over our land and its culture if, year after year, millions and millions pour in, circumventing a filter that the people put in place for a reason.
Like we're gonna be not the
Yes.
majority anymore.
On the other hand, as I mentioned, I think about the
Yeah.
human impact. It's not easy to look at someone who's been living here for decades, who's made a life for themselves, and tell them you cannot stay. And taking a step back and seeing it from a bird's eye view, sometimes I wonder about the
Oh boy. I
cosmic
think I gotta
justice
sneeze.
aspect of it all. You know, where we're born, what opportunities we have.
Yeah.
It's all about the lottery of life. For many of these illegal immigrants, living as a silent underclass in America is preferable to their lives back home. And I
Possibly, yeah,
wonder
I
to
could see that.
myself, is
Depending
it
on which war-torn country you're in, which gang-controlled country you're in, which area your country is, which whether or not your family has any opportunity for education, whether or not there's famine. There's a lot of reasons why people might want to come to a different country. And honestly, I believe that the fact that most countries have been Americanized in some way, or American culture has bled into their own culture in some way, it kind of leaves some kind of appeal. So if you're going to want to come to a different country or wanting to leave a country, wouldn't you want to go to a country where you felt like you knew a little bit more about it? Like you felt a little more connected about it? Like, let me know what you think about that.
fair for me to stand against it? If were I to be on the other side of this equation, I would desperately wish that someone in the position I'm in now would stand for me. So, yeah, I think about that. Yet, loath as I am to admit it, I am subject to the same human conditions as with everyone else that compels me to put the more acute principles that envelop my existence above grand,
Hmm.
lofty, philosophical prose about cosmic.
Better America than Europe? Agreed. Agreed. I don't know. Actually, I've lived in America my whole life, so I might be a little bit jaded to it because, like, maybe I'm just taking it for granted. Not my whole life. I've lived in other countries too for like a year or two at a time. But I really do believe that Europe has beautiful countries. Africa has beautiful countries. South America has beautiful countries. I don't think that necessarily America is the best place, but it might be the best economically for you to come in and just like the American dream, right? I could have nothing and then have everything at some point in time.
Justice. America cannot be the dumping ground for the world's problems. More than that, I don't want it to be. That is a position I take as an expression of loyalty to a country that has given me a lot of opportunities. I know there's many people on who are firmly on one side or the other side, but I hope if you are stuck in the middle, this discussion gave you something to think about. And as always, thanks for watching.
This guy makes some really good points, really good videos. They seem very concise and well thought of. I do believe that the immigration problem is an actual problem, and I do believe that there's a lot of people out there that are just living their lives and not negatively affecting us, and more like positively impacting us. There's a lot of reasons why you might feel really sympathetic, but there's also a lot of reasons why, holistically and for our country, that there shouldn't be illegal immigration and that we should be able to have some checks and balances, or at least make it to where it's not so prevalent and such a big deal. So